I've asked this question to numerous ghost hunting groups that's been on my show. I say to them, well, you're in this old prison, right? Or you're in this mental institution. You're trying to get an entity to talk to you. Do you ever ask them, do you want a cigarette, and see if you get a response? I mean, you know, back those days, everybody in the prisons would smoke. Everybody in the mental institutions were smoking. I mean, a cigarette to them was like, you know, like a steak would be for me, you know. And I would think that would create, you know, some type of response. But no, they don't, you know, they just don't ask that question. Have you ever asked that question out of curiosity?
Yeah, we have tried to talk with him. Oh, I'm sorry, you're talking.
No, go ahead.
Talking to Michael. Go ahead. Well, I was just going to say we had asked, you know, we would try to talk with him. And then, you know, like I say, sometimes we're just talking among ourselves and suddenly a voice chimes in because we're saying something that they find interesting or something or you know, it's almost like they think that we can hear what they're saying. But I know one time when we were in that hospital over in Fayetteville, we played some audio, and it was like an emergency, you know, like ambulance service or something, just to see what kind of activity might stir up that way.
And what happened?
And, you know, continue recording. Well, we got a lot of responses, a lot of audio of anomalous nature, and I can't say that really stirred it up or not, because it seemed like during all 3 visits that we did, at least 3, that we came away with several dozen audios that we couldn't explain.
Oh, wow.
And some of them were the classic, you know, help me or, you know, go away type things.
Oh, you mean like get away from me, get out of here. Yeah.
Yeah, get out of here, you know.
Yeah. Did you pick up like any door slams and stuff like that? And
well, I know there was a group that we broke up into 2 groups, and I know there was one group that heard the rapping on the wall. I'm not sure if they got that recorded or not.
No, I was going to ask you a question, Brent. I mean, if somebody's just starting out in ghost hunting, what type of equipment do they really need to actually work? I mean, how much do they have to spend, and what type of equipment would they need? Just the basics.
Well, yeah, just the basics. Well, a good digital recorder where you can transfer the audio to your computer afterwards, and maybe having like a WavePad program where you can review your audio online afterwards on the computer, and be able to share it with other people, and then you know, decent camera, and hopefully one that, you know, one for taking pictures, one with you know, digital motion picture too, film, and then I'd say you're pretty much set, you know. And of course, I've also used the Ghost Box, and that's been pretty interesting there too.
I don't know about the Ghost Box. I have mixed feelings because I have a massive electronic background. And the problem is with the Ghost Box, it's just scanning the frequencies up and down, I mean, ultra fast. So, I mean, a lot of times you can be saying something and you're going to hear something that's going to come back somewhat of an answer. And that's the only thing I really feel a little bit uncomfortable. And I actually talked to a guy who manufactures them and sells them on Facebook and a couple other things. And he actually told me in a conversation, but he said, hey, don't mention my name. He goes, they don't work, you know, but he loves it because he's getting a couple $100, you know, a pop for him, and people are buying them up as fast as he can produce them.
Yeah. Well, you know, I understand that. And I realize pareidolia does exist. You know, people can hear something and manufacture it in their mind. But, you know, with the group I was working with, we just had these Radio Shack digital AM/FM radios and just had them modified, and they worked fine that way. And what we do is, you know, I didn't want just a yes or no or just a general answer. I wanted specific responses, and after, I mentioned John Keel earlier, because I had been in touch with him by correspondence and talked to him on the phone. And so, when he passed away back in July 3rd of 2009, and all, he was a big influence on my research and investigations into UFOs and the paranormal. And, I thought, man, this is quite a loss to the field and, to me personally, because I can't just pick up the phone and, chat with him now and ask him some questions. And in March of 2010, I thought, I was with a group that was using the Ghost Box, and I thought, man, it would be awesome if I could, just think about John Keel while we're doing this and get something. And, that's all I heard at the time was just radio traffic. I couldn't say that I heard anything in specific. But then in May of 2010, we were on a ghost investigation, and Brett Oldham had his Ghost Box, and there was a recorder or two present recording the session at a haunted site in Clifton, Tennessee. And so anyway, he said, I just heard John Keel, and he heard it twice. We played back the audio twice. John Keel came through the radio, and I never hear John Keel coming through the radio down here,
Oh, yeah.
I could listen to it all day, and John Keel would never be mentioned. So then July 3rd, the night of July 3rd, 2010, which was the 1-year anniversary of his passing, we just happened to be doing a session up near Nashville in Thompson Station at the home of Sandy Nichols. And Brett was there again, and I said, hey, guys, let's try to reach out to John Keel. And so we started up. We had the big stereo speakers, and we had, I think, about 3 recorders operating at the time. And he says, John, asked his guide on the other side, can you have John Keel say his name? And a couple seconds, and then a male voice says, John Keel. And we got it clear audio. And so then I said, okay, I wanted to add, we asked some more questions because John Keel was interested in Bigfoot and all these other things. Asked, and Mothman, what about Bigfoot? What can you tell us about Bigfoot? And this strong male voice said, Smuck Bigfoot. See? And
wow.
And then there was 2 other voices that see, and another one said see. And so then I knew what I don't think anyone else in the group knew, a little more about Keel. And I says, what can you tell us about Jadu? Because he wrote a book published in 57 about his trek through, from Egypt to Singapore and studying the magicians and such who, street magicians and so on. And there was this belief over in that part of the world and this black magic called Jadu. And so he wrote a book in 57, published it, was called Jadu, The Mysteries of the Orient. And so I asked him, John, what can you tell us about Jadu? And this voice came through and said, Jadu, eh? And we were pretty startled at that point. And I said, yeah, what can you tell us about Jadu? And then this voice goes on this long rant, kind of fading in and out, says, into the fire, into the fire. And then he faded out, and then something about teach me outside, which to me, I'm thinking, okay, black magic, that is sort of into the fire. And I can't be sure what this voice was talking about, but then teach me outside. This was something. Keel was a bookworm. He called himself a reading machine, but he loved to hike and go out, and he was quite the walker, and he loved to be outside and, traveling, like I say, a lot of times he was on foot over in Egypt and places that he went to in India. And so anyway, there were a lot of other things that come up, and then we even started writing stuff down on paper. And it might take a while, but sooner or later, what we had on paper would come through sometimes on the over the radio.
Oh, that's very interesting.
So, I know I talked to, I was writing to an EVP, quote, expert, unquote, who who had been in that field for a while. I mentioned about some of my experience with the ghost box, and this person said, well, that's interesting. I'm glad maybe, I was able to reassure, but it's not really a scientific approach. And I wrote back and I said, well, as long as you're getting results that are clear and anomalous, no matter whether it's through a radio or just straight through the recorder, for some reason for us, and also each time we do a session, we'd ask for our guides. And one of Brett's, who taught me how to use the ghost box, was Bishop. So just about every time I do a session, I ask for who's my guide, and I'll get Bishop and another one named Philip, whoever they are. and then at the end of the session, we'll ask the session be cleared. We want them to say clear when they're ready to cease contact with us, and not have anybody followed home by a ghost or anything.
Yeah, that would not be good.
Because it's been reported. And so one time I said clear, and this male voice said, this can't clear, this is energy. And I was telling Brett about it, and he says, well, maybe we need to explain next time what we mean by clear. Maybe somebody apparently doesn't quite understand. And we've been hearing a voice over and over that was kind of like Enoch, and we weren't sure if it was Enoch with an I or an O. So one time I was doing a session here at the house, and I said, can you tell us, is it Enoch with an I or an O? And it took several minutes, and I was about to give up, and I was given one final try, and this voice came through and said, Enoch with an O. And I was like, and I repeated what it said, and I recorded it, and I said, holy blank, Enoch with an O, yeah. And, but it's rare to get a full sentence, but sometimes you do. And,
well,
and when it's specific like that, I have to take it serious. But
wow,
anyway,
the paranormal. There's so many strange things out there. I just he think things that well, I don't know. Like I said, paranormal has changed so much. And, I have my feeling about ghost boxes, but I could be 100% wrong, but if you got answers like that, then boy, if I had that happen to me, I would have to really think over my philosophy on ghost boxes really fast.
Well, there have been, Keel documented a lot of cases where, strange voices came through all sorts of equipment, radios and telephones, and they had there was a parapsychologist back in the 70s, D. Scott Rogo, who wrote a book called Phone Calls from the Dead. It is libel, and of course over in Europe, Germany, there was a lot of back in the 70s research and 60s with EVPs coming through radios. They'd tune in between the stations. So I think it's quite possible. I know that there's a lot of people who just jump to conclusions about this, but I was very careful because I was skeptical, and I kept telling the group I was with, I says, because somebody would hear maybe something like yes, and they'd say, I said yes, and I'd say, come on now, let's get it, let's actually have something where we get a specific answer, and when I got the first and last name of John Keel probably a half a dozen times, he even here at the house, I was, that did it for me. Because a lot of critical questions are still, is it really John Keel? I know John Keel felt that a lot of these things were mimics. He called them ultra-terrestrials, kind of like the elementals of the ancient occult world and such. Mischievous spirits or whatever. But it was there. And then I know another time there was, and I sent the audio. In fact, I played it to this MUFON group down in Huntsville, Alabama. Rich Hoffman, I did an interview with him. He was state director for a while, pretty good while, for MUFON in Alabama and I think Mississippi. And so I did an interview for Alternate Perception